welcome back, everybody. I'm Ray Pace. Scott Wildenheim has stepped off for this episode, so I'm going to try to do the intro just as good as Scott would. But to my left, I have firefighter paramedic Caleb Ferroni. To my right, I have our guest, Brian Abbott, firefighter paramedic. And over on the other side, we have Dr. John Hill. So the normal crowd, and today we're going to be talking about firefighter and first responder mental health. So this is a topic that I don't think we talk about enough. We were actually doing a live at another fire department where this came up and some questions were asked about firefighter mental health and, what resources are out there, what's available. So we're going to hit a lot of hot topics today. And, I think it's going to be something that I think needs to be talked about more is probably the biggest point. So, Brian, I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of give a background on you. So thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. No, I appreciate it. No, I'm Brian Abbott. I've been in the fire service since about 2003. So started at Marymount Hospital working in the ER. Always been interested in it as a kid growing up. Did vocational school to actually have my stuff when I graduated. So I had my EMT and my fire one when I graduated high school. So that was a great opportunity. Got hired at my local fire department in Richfield. And then from there, kept testing, trying to get on a job. I ended up getting on a larger township in Summit County. And put in about 15 years there, was a lieutenant there for 5 years. Really got busier over the years. We really started to struggle with kind of that nursing home fatigue there and things like that. I had the opportunity to go through an active shooter event, which not everybody has been through, and obviously it was extremely traumatic. And I had a lot of fallout with those things down the road. We'll talk about that more. And then when I decided to kind of make my transition out of that department, I started with the city of Elyria 2 years ago this December it'll be. So
awesome.
It's been a great transition. I absolutely love where I'm at now and really happy to be here. So
Awesome. That's great. All right. Well, Brian, once again, thanks for being here. I think we would like to hear your personal story as much as you're open to sharing. I know that you're a huge advocate. You and Cody were out. We hosted a symposium out in Trumbull County, Brothers in Battle, was out there teaching. And, Brian stood up and talked about his story and then some of his personal struggles, what he's learned from that. And I think it's, your story, whatever you feel comfortable with sharing, I think will really hit home with our viewers and everybody watching the podcast.
Yeah. I've definitely talked about it enough, and I can kind of dive into the whole thing and kind of what happened. So, throughout our careers, we obviously tons and tons of bad calls. How we deal with them, we discussed that emotional bucket and how it fills up. Once it overflows, we have nothing to give it, and we're in trouble, and we're beyond, sometimes repair, and actually in crisis. So when we get to that point, who do we reach out for help and things like that? There wasn't a lot available, I thought, at the time. So I found myself, 15 years into a career department, beginning to actually hate it. I was absolutely done. I was contemplating leaving the fire service. I was EMS burnout. I really, sorry to say this, don't enjoy EMS as much as I do fire. I love the fire service. I'm hardcore about serving the people and putting ourselves first. We're definitely diving into that culture of the me first fire service, where my safety comes before everybody else's. Risk adverse to the point where we can't do our jobs. And we kind of developed that, it's becoming more discussed, that moral injury, and guys are struggling deeply with it, and they don't know how to talk to their officers about it because they feel their officers, are not on their side or not approachable, or maybe, have these real hard conversations. So I didn't have the opportunity to talk to anybody about it, so I just went home and struggled silently with it. Began drinking heavy, struggled with alcohol for a few years, really, began kind of pushing myself away and isolating from my family. Family life was like not enjoyable to me. It became just too much stress. It became overwhelming. And it came to the point where like small tasks, washing the dishes, doing the laundry was overwhelming. Like I'd sit on a couch and be like, I don't have it in me. Like there's nothing there. And it just kind of spiraling down. And you hit the point where like, start coming up with a plan. Like I'm done. I think I'm giving up. And I reached out to a guy I knew was on peer support for Summit County, and called him. And I said, "Hey, man, I was in tears. I was broke, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is what I'm thinking. I think I'm going to kill myself, and I don't know who to talk to. And he's like, whoa, I did not expect that from you. He goes, you hid that really well, but he goes, I'm going to get you help. So he goes, go ahead and call your EAP. And then he goes, I'm going to make some phone calls. He goes, just make sure you're safe. You know, he asked me a bunch of questions that peer support requires. Make sure, you know, I'm in the right state of mind. They don't need to call a squad for me or something like that.
Sure.
I called the EAP. I went to a meeting with, I think one of their people was available within a week. And you know, she was some Russian lady. I could barely understand her. She really didn't care. And she's like, well, maybe you should drink less. And okay. Like, wow, thanks for the help. This was useful. In the meantime, he was working in the background, got me kind of hooked up with SUMA, and they have a traumatic stress center, and got me in there. So the guy I got was awesome. He was a retired policeman, retired fireman, and started working with me. And, you know, he could see how broke I was. And we're doing this once a week thing. That's all insurance will cover. Everything, you know, extras out of pocket, you know, and it becomes expensive very quick. So kind of working with them. And I'm like, man, this is just not cutting it. Like, I feel like I am beyond repair, and I am not getting any better. And we always want the quick fix, right? So just lean back in the alcohol because that's the fastest fix. You know, at least numbs the pain enough where you can suffer through the day. And, you know, I never went to work drunk or anything like that. But when I was off, you know, I drank a lot. And, you know, it was just a self-medication thing to kind of wallow in that coping. Yeah. Because you're in that survival mode. And you don't know where to go from there. So there's no real, what you feel, no real options. You don't feel like anybody supports you. You don't feel like you can talk to anybody. You don't feel like I can go, hey, let me tell you how I'm suffering. Like, that's just not how we're wired. So it's a difficult thing. So throughout those 6 months I worked with him, you know, I had some improvements, but then I just kept sliding back. And it was just deeper and deeper to the point, I think it was August-ish. You know, we had some sort of event for my wife at night, and I came home and I went to the garage. I just started drinking, and I'm like just standing there. I'm like, you know, that was like, I was completely content with this is fine. I'm gonna end it tonight. So, you know, I build forcible entry props. You know, and the crazy part is, like, that's a huge passion of mine, is throw a rope over the forcible entry prop, and I just kneeled into it and just started watching the television come in, the lights go out, and I was completely content with it. Man of faith. I believe in going to church. I believe in God. I had a male voice yell, and it felt like it kind of grabbed me by the back of the brainstem and told me to stand up. And it actually, like, scared me. And I kind of, like, heard it, and I tried to stand up, and I was, you know, already kind of wobbly and messed up from going out, and was able to, like, get it off my neck and just kind of stumble to the floor. And I just kind of laid there for a minute and just, like, looking around trying to figure out where this guy was at. And I was like, there's nobody in here. Like, my garage is closed. Like, it's... So, you know, I'm like... So it's like... kind of trying to text my wife, and I remember having a hard time seeing my phone, and just told her, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm a terrible husband, something along those lines. You know, and left it at that. And it was no more than 2 minutes later, the garage door pops open, and she comes in, and I'm just, like, laying on a heap in the floor, you know, just kind of a broken man. And, like, she doesn't realize what just happened. And, you know, so she kind of helps me into the house, and I'm just a wreck. I'm sobbing. I can't, uncontrollable. She's terrified. She has no idea what's going on. This is kind of blindsided her. So, you know, she gets me in bed, and then the next morning I'm scheduled to work. And she's like, well, I don't want him home alone. I think you should go to work. So I went to work that day. You know, and looking back on it, I feel bad for my crew, and I hope I didn't put them in any danger. Thankfully, nothing happened, but I always have that kind of, like, you know, as the officer, that's my responsibility to be, you know, on top of the game and take care of my guys. And it was just, I wasn't there that day. So about halfway through the day, I get a call from Cody Trestrail from Brothers in Battle. He's like, hey, you know, I talked to Kelly. We got to chat. I'm like, yeah, I bet we do. So he kind of talks about things, and he's like, there's options. You know, there's Rosencrantz down in, I think it's North or South Carolina. I can't remember. Treatment facility. You know, you can go here, you can go there. You know, he goes, but I already made a phone call and scheduled you, so I just need to say yes. And I'm like, well, where? And he's like, the IFF Center of Excellence can take you on Monday. And I think this was a Friday. And I'm like, okay, you know, I can probably do that. You know, how long is it for? A couple days? And he's like, no, man, it's 30 days. And he goes, at the minimum. And I'm like, well, I can't leave my family for 30 days. You know, that's craziness, you know. And he's like, well, what good are you doing your family right now, the way you are in the state you're in? And yeah, I get it. You know, it kind of beats me up a little more. And I'm like, well, let me call Kelly and talk to her and see what she thinks. And he goes, well, I talked to her all day, but you could call her.
He planned
He made the hard conversation happen, and he went around me. And some people get really mad about that, but he talked to my wife and had that hard conversation. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say behind my back, but for my best interest, because I was not in the right state of mind or place to make those decisions to take care of myself. So call her and, tell her, and I can't leave for 30 days. I'm worried about cutting the grass, all those things that are not important, or excuses at that point to not go.
Sure.
And she's like, you've been gone for 2 years. She goes, what's 30 days? And I was like, whoa, like that hit me deep. And I was like, that one hurt, the point of, what do you mean? And she's like, you haven't been here. You haven't been present. You're distant. You're, you kind of, if you guys, American Sniper, you see that scene where you sit in front of the TV with just, I think, the snow on and just kind of tuned out. Like, that's how I spent, the last 2 years. It sucks. So, call Cody back. I'm like, all right, man, let's do this. So, I get home, start packing my stuff. IFF Center of Excellence calls me. They give me, packing list, everything I need to bring, all the stuff I can't bring, how to prepare. And then, like, Sunday, loaded up with my wife, and we drove down to D.C., did, like, a little Arlington Cemeteries tour and things like that. And then, it's not about another hour outside D.C. Dropped me off the front gates, and that was it. It was like, looking back, and she's leaving, and I'm like, wow, all right, this is happening. Like, so, it was tough. And, so I had the experience to go through that, and I know we talk about that later, but got home, and there's a transition period, and it's difficult to transition from coming there from completely, like, stress-free, sterile environment where you have nothing to worry about back into, life punching you in the face. And
sure,
it hit me hard quick because kids, everybody got COVID, like, the week after I got home. Everybody was sick. It was like 2 months later, I was at my sister-in-law's house, and some drug deal went bad behind her house. Dude got shot. I'm finding myself outside kind of running cover for the cops with them as I'm treating this dude that got shot. And I'm like, wow, well, welcome home. Like, this is,
wow.
those things. So, stress immediately hits you. I had a very significant kind of ahas there when I was there, and learned a lot about myself and a lot what I was going through. Figured out some of the deep-rooted things that, were bringing me down, and an active shooter event was one of them that really took a toll on me. There was, 7 people, 3 kids, so it was just, stuff that I didn't realize I processed, things I blame myself for there, things that were out of my control, cognitive distortion type things, being real hard on myself, for not doing better, and they add up, and then you add all the other bad stuff we see, and it's like, of course it happened. Why didn't I see it coming? But, in my mind, I was good, and I was, taking care of myself. So coming back around, going back to my department, the one thing I struggled with was I still did not want to be there. It was just not for me at that point. It had made a culture change to the point of it was risk adverse. It was me first. I didn't want that. I wanted to go to a workplace that has aggressive firemen that want to serve the people they swore to protect, and they're going to put their all forth to make that happen. And that's always been a passion of mine, and I know you've seen with me and Cody, like that's yes. What we preach.
100%.
So I'm like, well, what do I do? Where do I go? I had a buddy of mine offered me a rope access job doing windmill work, and I'm like, well, I love ropes. Like, that's not a bad gig. So started talking about it, and was supposed to have an interview, and their snowstorm came. The interview got canceled, and then a couple weeks later, the lateral transfer position for the city of Elyria opened up. And I'm like, man, I know that's an aggressive department. I know they see fire, and I'm like, and they have no ambulances. So I mean, they're really selling it for me. And so I took a shot, and I did it. I did the interview. I figured I was too old, and I didn't hear anything for like 6 months. I'm like, oh, I guess I blew that. So I'm working through things, and I'm just like, either way, I'm getting out of here because I can't do these, 6 nursing home calls a night and just get beaten to the ground. So, got a phone call in like August, and I think it was the chief's or HR. Chief wants to know if you want the job. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. She goes, we figured we were just doing it for fun. I'm like, no, I'm really interested.
Yeah, you're serious.
So she goes, all right, let me talk to the chief. We'll do a second interview. She calls me back 5 minutes later. She goes, no, chief says no second interview. If you want the job, it's yours. We'll start pre-hire testing. So
awesome.
Cool. So jump right in, do my pre-hire. I get through all that, and there I am as a brand new guy with 15 years, 16 years on the job. Kind of standing there like, whoa, this is gonna be weird. Like, I gotta be the probie again. So that's 2 years later now. This month, best move I ever made. I absolutely love it there. It's a great department, and it's it's what I needed for me and for my beliefs in the fire service and how I feel I can make, teaching and, the fire service move forward in, the craft.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
And I can hear the passion
Yeah.
in your voice when you talk about that.
It is.
Right. And that's a huge thing. And for anyone that's unfamiliar with Cody Trust Trail or Brothers in Battle and you teach with them, it's all about mission first,
Mm-hmm.
and it's Cody talks a lot. And so do the whole core group of the instructors from Brothers in Battle. They all talk about it is them first. It is about them. We are here for them. And no different than our message with EMS. We are here for them. When they call 911, maybe it might not be an emergency to us, but to them it's an emergency. No different than a fire. We are there for them. And Cody's message and your all's message is huge about why are we doing this? What are we here for? And what your community expects of you at 3 a.m.
Yes.
Because they want the best version of yourself. So it's just your passion. It
Yeah.
just comes out, like you can tell you're happy there, and that's
Absolutely, yeah.
And
we
that's
take
great.
it very seriously on the EMS side. Please don't take it as
No.
we pride ourselves on being very good paramedics, delivering excellent patient care.
Sure.
But obviously, we're big firemen there. We love going to fires. So
Yeah.
that's our specialty, I would say.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that
Yeah.
story
Yeah,
with
thank
us and everyone. And that's terrible that you had to go through that. And but I think a couple of the things that I'm picking out of that story is Cody was a huge support system.
Yes.
And was a great brother to you in the time of need and with your family. And I wouldn't take it as he went behind your back like you had mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't take it that way at all. He did that for you, for your family, to help you, and I think that's huge. And anybody that knows him, definitely that's his character.
Yep.
I want to say it's like faith, family, fire
Yep.
is like his
That's
big
our
motto.
motto
I don't
for
want
the conference.
to steal it, and I hope he's not going to be mad at me for that. So, Cody, if you see this, I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. But that's what this is about, right? That's what fire and EMS is. This is supposed to be. We're supposed to be a family. We're supposed to help each other. And he cared to help you, and I think that's a huge story. And I think sometimes we're going to get into this as we continue down this path. When we continue to talk about this, is there has to be that person to want to help one of us, right? It's not a secret that, hey, I can see John, you're having a bad day today. And what's going on? Why don't you pull him in and talk to him about it? You have to have those difficult conversations, and I think that's where we're missing the boat, because that's our next topic. Talks about we're missing the boat with mental health in the fire service and in EMS and law enforcement, probably our military. These are stressful jobs where we see things that others do not. Right? You talked about an active shooter. One of the other scenarios that we had when I was attending OFE, one of the other lieutenants that was in OFE with me, they had 2 children drown in a pool. That is traumatic. And as you put it, our bucket essentially is going to start to overfill eventually.
And obviously what's traumatic for you might not be traumatic for me, and
Yes.
vice versa.
Yeah.
I mean, and this goes for full-time to volunteer, or receptionists even in some cases. You can deal with PTSD, and you can see things that we're not meant to see.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Trauma really
some of
doesn't
us-
have a face or an
No,
identity.
no.
It attacks everybody
And
differently.
I think it's amazing you made the point, like Brian said about his wife. You weren't there for 2 years. Like,
Yeah.
we're not the only ones living with it. Our families are suffering from it too, through us. And I think that that's very important to talk about. That, I have a wife and 2 daughters at home, and what I bring home and not bring home. I mean, a personal story that I had is, I don't know if you know Dave DeRico.
Yeah, I
But
know
I'm
Dave
sure you
quite
do.
well.
He and I picked up an overtime shift a while back, and him and I found ourselves in a situation where a guy had a gun on him, and there was a bit of a standoff there for a while with the cops. But not too much to say more about it, except for the fact that I went home and said something to my wife. I didn't know that at the time my 6-year-old was listening.
Okay.
And so for months after that, she was going to therapy, because every time I left the house, she was in tears that I was going to die.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know that at first until it came out through therapy that had happened, and she had heard that. And it's like, I bring home things, and I have to be careful what I talk about.
Yeah.
And then who do we talk it to?
Exactly. What
It's
do I
like-
do? What do I do with this
Yeah.
bag? It's
So
because I
now-
got to get rid of it.
Even though she tells me that I'm closed book sometimes, she's like, "Why don't you want to talk about it?" Well, that just adds to it. It's like, I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
So it makes it even harder. It's like a continuous revolving door down. It's
Mhm.
like,
Yeah, it is. It's tough, and figuring out how to balance that in our lives, and it's something we got to be able to develop a relationship with our spouse to be able to have those conversations, but in a way that's healthy and is not detrimental to the relationship. And it's very hard to do. It takes a lot of work, and I definitely haven't mastered it. We found different ways to talk about things, but at the same time, I still need to have my outlets. My buddies, either fire service related or not. That's who I need to talk to.
And it's good people like Dave
Yeah.
Tirico. I mean,
Yeah, I
and
love
he'll
Dave.
probably be mad at me for mentioning. He won't listen. This is EMS related.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, he's out.
But good people like him in your fire stations that sometimes people take for granted, because he's very much so faith, family,
Yes.
and then fire.
He's a great fireman.
So,
Yeah, so
I mean, but I have a great relationship with our guys on shift. On our RA shift, we're very strong. We come to each other.
that's awesome.
And constantly we're talking and getting together outside of work. And sometimes that's closer family than you have anywhere else,
Yeah.
So,
Sure. And I like both of your points about what is traumatic for you might not be traumatic
Right.
for me, or vice versa, and working in the ER, you see a lot of bad just because we're bringing the bad to you, right? So, I mean, it's just whether we're seeing it in the street or whether it's being seen in the emergency room, and you never know what kind of call is going to bother you. And, my wife's a nurse, so having that conversation is pretty open.
Yeah.
And one of the stories for me was I had a gentleman hang himself, and that was not what I had a problem with. And I actually told my wife, I was like, I feel like something's wrong with me. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, it was actually the scene. And it's just one I'll never forget. This gentleman thought his wife was cheating on him, decided to take his own life, unfortunately. And I'll never forget the staircase going up it. There was like 40 pictures, right? Family, they got a beautiful family, the beautiful kids. He took every picture down out of the frame, cut her face out of it, put it back into the frame, and then hung it back up.
that's commitment,
And then
It's
there were the letters like, to my daughter, to my son, the videotape, and I'm like, I remember like having that conversation, at night or whatever. We're getting ready to go to bed. I talked to my wife, and she's like, "How you doing?" She's like, "You just seem like kind of," because I'm a joker, right?
Yeah.
We all like to joke. We like to have fun. We were doing that before we even started talking about, this serious topic. And she's like, something bothering you. And I said, well, I had this call today, and she's like, "Is it okay? What was it?" And I told her, I said, it was the scene. Like, I felt like I was watching an episode of Criminal Minds. That where it was like, it was so real. It wasn't. I know that sounds really cold, but it wasn't that the issue that gentleman had taken his own life. It was actually about everything else. Like, you're looking at all of this and how long that individual took, and nobody saw it. Everybody missed the signs. He didn't ask for help. Maybe he didn't know an outlet for help, right? Because this is probably 15 years ago at least, and we're going to talk about that more. Times have changed. We have access to help, and it's getting better and improving, but it was really weird, because I've told that story a couple times, and my close friends know that story, but a couple of people listen to it, like, why'd that bother you?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know why it bothered me. It was just really weird. Like,
There's very sinister things that set in the mind when you're in that situation, and the darkness that's in that scenario. Like, your mind is very, in tune to that.
Yeah.
And it picks these things up, and it takes these snapshots, and you won't forget them. It'll be smells, it'll be sounds.
Exactly.
It is imprinted in your
Yeah.
amygdala, and it's,
Yep.
now what do? I got this tape recorder that just runs.
Yes.
And I'm reliving it constantly, and
but to your point also, I think that in a lot of times, good things have the same sensation.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I mean, like, I was telling my dad one day that I caught the scent of pine tree, and it was like a cold morning pine tree smell, and that takes me back to childhood. We have a cabin in Canada, and it's like, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's pretty cool. He's like, that's how the sense of, like, Christmas and stuff comes around. People, they relate that, but it can work against us too. And like you said, I mean, I'll never smell blood the same way.
Yeah,
It's
you're
like-
right. Yeah.
That's true.
To your point about missing the boat, whether it's EMS or whatever, your wife knew for 2 years that something was going on, and didn't intervene until essentially you
Correct.
attempted suicide.
Yep.
Were luckily unsuccessful in your suicide attempt, and then were able to get help.
Yes.
This gentleman obviously had enough time to
Yeah.
prepare his own death, cut out photos, hang them back up, prepare a video,
Yeah.
and then take his own life. And that happens in real close relationships with your spouse, with his friends. So I think overall, and I know we want to talk about health in the fire department and EMS and that space, but we're missing it all over the place.
We are.
Absolutely.
It's not just a problem in EMS. I mean, if you look at statistically, our jobs have a higher suicide rate. It's just because of what we deal with, and we don't have good outlets to help deal with that.
And I think the thing is the spouses are uneducated and not sure what to expect. My husband does shifts work; he's a fireman. They really don't know what we do all the time. They don't know what we see, how we hang out with each other at the station. And I think some of this stuff we're seeing is like our conference. We have a spouse track now. The spouses could go through and do everything we did at the conference.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So they're getting a little taste of why we're there, why we're training, and things like that. I wish there was more offered to spouses in general when somebody gets into this job. Like, I wish you could go take a class on what to expect, how to, kind of diffuse your husband when he comes home crabby and, tired and ran 20 calls after midnight.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff missing there that we're just not addressing. And I don't think it's at fault to anybody, but it needs to be thought about. It needs to be something,
Well, we expect a lot of time. I mean, next month will be 9 years that I've been married to my wife, and we've been together for longer than that. And we know each other. But even to your point, today, I don't think she understands some of what I deal with. And I'll never understand some of what she deals with. But we had talked about before maybe having an episode where we bring the spouses in here and we talk a little bit about how is it on that side of the table.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
actually,
have no idea.
So since you brought both this up, we talked off camera. I was at the Ohio Fire Chiefs Conference this year, and one of the clinicians was there, and she talked. Cannot remember her name. It's written down. Her husband is a captain on, I want to say it was like San Francisco Fire out in Cali.
Yeah.
And she's like, he's a captain, and we'll talk a little bit more about transitioning to home life a little bit. But she actually put up a whole slideshow exactly about what you both are talking about is, and it would apply to police, fire, emergency department. Let's put all this in there. Military. Mm-hmm. They talked about what's it like to be a spouse, and she actually helped design this program for what is this like? What are things to look for? Transitioning from, okay, you just got off a 24-hour shift, you come home now, what's that look like? Or maybe you worked overtime, so now there's a 48-hour shift and you're coming home, depending on what your shift is, 24, 48, etc., California swing, whatever you're doing out there. But she talked about what does that look like, and then what type of support system do they need. And she told a story about that, and she said, they were just together, and maybe like 6-8 months, she's like, we're not even married yet. She's like, California has a lot of wildfires. He comes home, I gotta go. She's like, okay. He's like, no, like, I gotta go. She's like, okay, well, when are you coming back? Like 4?
Don't know.
6? Like,
Yeah.
We're gonna do dinner or something, And he's like, no, I don't know. And she's like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, she's like, so she obviously understands all that now, works specifically with police, fire, military, but she goes, so now I'm new into this relationship. We're obviously serious. And then he's like, well, I might be back in a month. I might be back in 2 months. I don't know how long my deployment's going to be for this wildfire. She goes, he left. Day 2, I'm like, okay, this is okay. By like day 3, I'm a train wreck.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand. I can't talk to my family about it. They don't understand it. And she ended up talking to another wife of another firefighter that was deployed. Right.
Okay.
So she connected. She's like, her and I talked every day. We started to do this. Right. So there does need to be some support system, some education at home for the wives, or your spouses about things to see. They need outlets too, right?
Yep.
This is stressful for them.
Absolutely.
And I think we're just not there yet, right?
No,
It
we're
sounds
not.
like,
it sounds like people are trailblazing, but
Yes.
nobody's talking.
Yeah,
Correct.
That's the biggest
Yeah.
problem.
yes.
Like, I'll never pretend to understand what she goes through when I'm not home. She has my 2 daughters and her, and I'm gone for 24 hours. And, I mean, we've been together long enough she understands, and actually I think in some ways that helps our marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, to be gone
I
for
found
24
times
hours,
where I felt
it's-
like sometimes I needed that little bit of break. Like
Right.
sometimes we had
and I think it
newborns.
makes us stronger.
Yeah, I go to work to get some rest. Like,
But I'll never
because-
pretend
Yeah.
to believe that I understand what she goes through when I'm not home.
Yeah.
And I think that we have that relationship now, but it's still very foreign to each other.
Yeah.
Like, we just don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what they had started. She had started a camping trip, if my memory serves me right, on she's like, it's called like the Fire Family camping trip.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter like what shift you're on, whatever, this and that. And she's like, guys are really bad. I'm terrible at this. My wife will definitely own me for that. Is we'll go somewhere and she'll be like, you didn't introduce me. And I'm like,
No.
true story there. My bad. So I'll fall on that sword. But she said she owned that. She's like, you guys all huddle up and talk. And then there's all the wives standing around there. So like if I'm that new wife,
Yeah.
I don't know your wife. I've never met her.
It's weird.
So
it's awkward.
it's weird, but they all start to talk together, and all the spouses get together. And she actually talks about on that camping trip, that's how spouses connect.
Yeah.
So they built that own support system organically, essentially, in that environment. And then now it's like, she said she's even had another wife reach out like, hey, my husband, we've only been married for like 2 months. He gets deployed to go to a wildfire. He's going to be gone for 2 months. Well, they need somebody to talk to, or if they have a newborn. Or she's like, it's a huge support system of a big family, you know.
Yeah.
So and they go camping, and she had different years, and you just watched it grow to the point where it took up the whole projector screen, you know. And that was really awesome. But that is probably something we're definitely lacking on.
But also, I mean, with your wives, I mean, my wife, we've been together a long time. I've been in the fire service, this will be 21 years for me. And then you said, longer for you. And Ray, you've been a long time.
Yeah.
So our wives should be able to take some of that knowledge and pass it to the new people.
100%.
Because, I mean, we have a guy that they just got married, to be 2 years, and that's still a new relationship. They just got a house. They just moved. Mm-hmm. And she's got to spend 24 hours alone now in this new house. And it's like, my wife can be a help in that case to be like, hey, let's talk. This is what I experience.
And we've all bought houses, right? We've gone through the stress of buying a house.
Yeah.
And then we just did. Yeah. So that's on top of, I mean, that's normal stress for someone to have in their lifetime, but not necessarily it's normal like during every spring you're going to buy a house, right? That's extra stress on top of whatever we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is the first year both of my kids are in school full time. I got a 5-year-old now and an 8-year-old, and it's like they're gone now. Yeah. And so my wife has a bit of an empty nest at the moment too, where it's like, what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do? Yeah. It's like the other day we went golfing for the first time together ever. The kids were in school. We're like, this is cool.
Yeah, it's always evolving, that whether it's home environment, work environment, but it's all compounding, right? So it's maybe they have that newborn, right? So that we talk about like your new hire. Maybe we talk about that if we hired a new person, and our organization's really good about it, is like, they assigned a union member to sit down. They made an entire packet. Hey, here's the history of our organization. These are the members that signed the charter. This is how you use your this is the relationship between union and management. And they're going down a list, right? I don't want to get into great detail, but I think everybody's understand what I'm saying. And they sit down, and what are they doing? They're teaching them, right? That's what they're doing. They're teaching them. So we get that new person. It's tradition, and then they are gonna find a spouse, maybe potentially get married, purchase a house, have a baby. These are all these you're gonna spend time with that person through their largest events in their entire life. Maybe they lose a family member, right? And we're supporting them in that. But we don't really kind of bring the wife and kids along for that ride or that orientation, for lack of a better word.
And sometimes we feel like we're shielding them, and trying to keep them, wholesome. I don't want them to be part of that. I don't. But at the same time, if they're not hearing it, it's not a normal part of their life. It's going to be a shock when you come home and you're angry, you're mad, and you're like, oh, what's wrong with Dad? Like, sometimes you just need to leave Dad alone when he comes home. And I think there's no connection though on education to that. And you know, well, like all these little conferences now, we're seeing like little breakout sessions where they'll bring in a panel, husband and wife. Like, what we could do that at an apartment. You could go get a senior fireman and a wife that's willing to talk about it, and then take the newest guy and his wife 100%. Or girlfriend. And here's what we're both struggling with, and they're very different.
Why are we missing it though? Is it a macho thing?
It is. I don't think a lot of people have the humility or want to drop the ego enough to be that open, because it is vulnerable. Like, you're like, not only look at me, like, come into my house.
The story you just told, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I commend you for telling it, because who's going to say that?
I think that's the problem, is if we're not talking about this more, it's just going to keep festering, and we're going to, darn, this guy killed himself again. What are we going to do? We got to do, everybody says we got to do something. It's like, well, what are we doing?